Welcome to episode 15 of the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Crow. I'm a mother of 3 who next year will be all teenagers. How did that happen? I'm also a yoga teacher and a consultant for yoga teachers and studios. In today's episode, we talk about how we can really empower our students to easily let us know if they would like to receive hands-on assists or not. This podcast was born out of how I still feel between the yoga classes, workshops, and teacher trainings that I attend in person. Sometimes I feel like I'm alone in the wilderness of yoga entrepreneurship. So I wanted to create a place where you can feel connected as a yoga teacher between the teacher trainings, classes, and workshops that you are taking. The Connected Yoga Teacher is a website, podcast, a live show, and a community of other yoga teachers from around the world. It is a place where you can connect to knowledge, inspiration, and community as we hear about a variety of topics from yoga teachers and other professionals. Topics like anatomy, philosophy, marketing, and today, why consent cards can make all the difference in your yoga class. Before we dive into today's episode, I also want to tell you about a couple of other things that I offer for yoga teachers. The podcast is here weekly, with huge thanks to my editing and show notes team, Rob and Laura. Sometimes it feels like a slight miracle when I get the episode ready for them to get out to you guys. Huge thanks to you, the listener, and also to those of you who have left a review for us in iTunes. I have a couple to read at the end of today's show. Thank you. If you would like to leave a review, we would be so grateful. You can head on over to iTunes to do that. Do you know about the live show? Since January, I've been doing a weekly live show. It's every Monday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's on our Connected Yoga Teacher Facebook page, and it happens live. And then we put all of the live shows onto the website. So you can go to theconnectedyogateacher.com, click on live show, and you'll see we're now over 20 episodes of that. That also feels like, wow, it's just coming together every week. Since May of 2017, I started sharing a yoga pose. For example, a really popular one this month has been where I show variations of bird dog pose and how to modify it so that all students can participate with it. And then I talk about the multifidus muscles that are along the spine. They're part of the core 4. I'll let you guys go and find that. I'll also put a link to that in the show notes. And then in the second half of the live show right now, what I've been doing is sharing a tip or a tool for yoga teachers. There's also episodes dating back to January of 2017 where it was all topics that yoga teachers were asking me about. Another way that you can stay connected to knowledge is through our courses. If you go to theconnectedyogateacher.com, click on courses. Right now we have 3 courses available, and I plan to keep adding to those. I know a lot of you can't travel to courses, and so we're trying to bring courses to you. And we were doing them live, but a lot of you are asking for the replay. So before they go live again, you can check out the replays there. There's the Money Mindset Workshop with Rosalind Kemmer, who we heard from in episode 6. There's Introduction to Prenatal Yoga with Kim McDonald and I of Mama Nurture. That's our prenatal yoga school. And then there's Yoga for Pelvic Health, which is hosted by myself. So you can see all of the replays there and get the booklets and everything. Lastly, if you're feeling like you're really stuck at a place in your yoga business where you're kind of doing this loop with the same challenge or block around marketing, maybe your schedule, your website, getting out there to teach, whatever issue it is, you can set up a consultation call with me. If we've never worked together before, you book an initial consultation call, which is 90 minutes, and we cover 3 topics. It's very in-depth, and you get a full recording of the call. All of the details for that are on theconnectedyogateacher.com under Work With Me. Okay, so let's dive into today's episode. When a yoga student arrives at a new class with a new teacher, they have no idea if hands-on assist will be used. For some students, touch might be a nice added bonus, but for others, it could feel uncomfortable or distracting, or it may even trigger past trauma. When you book a massage, you're already giving permission for touch. But when you sign up for a yoga class, are you giving permission to touch? This is why I'm really excited for you guys to meet Molly Kitchen today. Molly became a yoga teacher in 2009. In 2016, she completed her 500 hour with Christina Sell and Gayokonda Parker at the San Marcos School of Yoga. I had actually spoken with her before, so this is an interview that we kind of held off and waited. You'll hear why. So Molly lives with her husband Joshua in Western Massachusetts. Molly's classes combine physical rigor with attention to alignment, balanced by humor, mythic stories, and a discerning spiritual philosophy. She has been particularly influenced by Christina Sell, Gayokonda Parker, Sarah Rose Page, and Amy Reed. Molly is the founder and director of Adhikara Yoga School, which is, I like this part, really dedicated to integrating social justice values into the teaching curriculum. We're talking with Molly today because she's the creator of Yoga Consent Cards. There's a new website. It's just launched right around the time of this podcast launching. Molly's vision was to make yoga consent cards affordable and durable, a really great quality. And she actually sent me some a long time ago when we first spoke about this, when I told her about my own homemade consent cards, and we have them at Tone Studio right now. They work beautifully. Our students love them. I had read a post on Facebook a while ago, thanks to my friend Susan, who's a yoga teacher. And Molly had said, I make yoga accessible by giving my students consent cards that allow them to choose whether or not they'd like hands-on assists. I also teach my YTT trainees to never assume that they can touch another's body without permission. This teaches respect, equality, sensitivity, and straight up consent. So this is what drew me to reach out to Molly. Also, I'm excited for the end of the interview with Molly, where she shares some great points on how to maintain a personal yoga practice. Okay, so let's welcome Molly to the show. Welcome, Molly, to the podcast today.
Thanks, Shannon. I'm really excited to be here.
Is there anything else that you want to tell us about what you're doing right now in terms of your teaching or as a yoga student?
Sure. Well, as a student, I am in a 500-hour training with Christina Sell and Gayokonda Parker. And I feel like it's significant enough because it's really increased my depth of understanding. And it's also a training over the course of 2 years. And the trainees are from all different types of yoga. So it's very non-dogmatic and yet still manages to have to provide us with a clear perspective. So that's been a really useful way for me to stay engaged with other yoga teachers and just kind of touch in with what's happening in other little pockets of yoga around the country. That takes place in Austin, Texas. So I go down there every so often. That's been helping a lot in terms of my training. Also, I would say it's significant. I teach a lot at I live in Western Massachusetts, where there's 5 colleges in the area. And so I teach at 2 of those colleges, Hampshire College and Amherst College. And that has been teaching there. I teach semester-long classes, and those have been places where the consent cards have been really, really warmly received by the students for a variety of reasons. One of them, I think, being that these particular groups of students just have a heightened awareness for kind of social justice and some of these issues that come up around consent. So that, and then finally, I've also done a 40-hour training in trauma-sensitive yoga, which has been pretty significant for me in deciding to develop the consent cards and use them for all of my classes. So I know we'll talk about that more, but that's been huge. And I also lead groups that are being groups of students, groups of folks who have experienced trauma and who are now taking yoga as part of adjunct therapy. So they're studying the effects of yoga on those who've experienced trauma. So that's as well.
That's pretty exciting.
It is.
So with the consent cards, when did you start using your own consent cards? Was it after that training that you just talked about with the trauma-sensitive yoga?
Yes. Yeah. I took that training in the fall, and the teachers for that are David Emerson and Jen Turner, and they're out of the trauma center that's in Brookline, Massachusetts. And that training was incredibly eye-opening for me. I felt like I just didn't even have the language beforehand to speak about what trauma is, and the many different types of trauma are, and how I could even begin to respond to that in class. And one of the things that David Emerson said that was really significant was, even if you're just teaching regular old public classes and you're not teaching specifically trauma-informed or trauma-sensitive classes, even just in that public class setting, it is most likely that you'll have at least one person who has experienced complex trauma in your class, because they go to yoga classes too. It's not like they're totally separated from the rest of us. And, and in some ways, we may have all experienced different types of trauma. So what he was saying to me was that, hey, this is important to bring into all yoga classes. So from there, I talked to my friend and graphic designer, and we got going to figure out how to get these on the mat. And I think I started this spring with my yoga teacher trainees, using them in all my classes.
That's great. So what do you think is the biggest benefit now since you started using the consent cards?
Oh, it totally clarifies things. That's the greatest part for me as a teacher, is it's just so clear. I'll just tell a really brief story from teaching at Hampshire College. I was actually hired to teach at Hampshire in an environment where the previous yoga teacher had been asked to leave by the students because she insisted on hands-on assist. And that was her style. I'm not trying to demonize her at all, but the students were really not down with that. And so I came into that environment. So I did no hands-on assist for my first 2 years at Hampshire, but I always gave feedback forms at the end of the semester. And they always said, at least a few of them said, please, can you do hands-on assist? They're so useful. They're so helpful. And they feel so good. I introduced them this past spring semester at Hampshire, and it was so cool to see, what's nice about one thing that's nice about the cards is you can flip them over at any time. And so I would really reiterate to the students this: I do not take this personally. You can, at any moment, you can decide that no, thank you, don't want hands-on assist, or yeah, now I'm feeling like I would like them, and flip the card over. So the clarity that has come from just being able to have them on the mat, I don't have to, waste any words. As we know, as yoga teachers, we're using so many words in our classes that it just really simplifies and clarifies things.
That's good. That is really good, because clarity is nice in a yoga class when you're not sure, especially when you have new students, or like you said, wow, what an atmosphere to step into after kind of the polar opposite, where you had students who definitely did not appreciate the hands-on assist.
Definitely, yes.
So then what do you see now in terms of how your students are responding with the different classes that you teach?
I would say something I've noticed is that sometimes students are like, I always hand them out and kind of explain them. I say, they're a bit self-explanatory, but it says, would you like hands-on assist? You can change it at any moment. And some of the students, they don't want to choose. They just kind of want to leave it up to chance. And they're like, well, it's totally fine, but I don't know. They feel a little bit, I don't claim to know exactly how they feel, but it seems like they're a little bit flustered by it. But then I'm building a culture, so they're new. And now students are really starting to get used to them. And I just hand them out in the beginning of class or as students are walking into the studio. And for the most part, most people want assist, which is really cool. And a lot of that is, I've been teaching in this area for quite a while. So a lot of the students know me over time. And I know that has built a lot of trust. It's building a culture, which takes time, but it's such a simple thing that I feel like it's going very smoothly.
Good. If you can kind of say what you might say to a beginner group at the beginning of the class when you hand out the cards.
Sure. So I usually say these are what I call consent cards, and they're for you to decide whether or not you'd like hands-on assist during class. So if you'd like me to come around and help you physically with the postures. One side says no, thank you. The other side says yes, please. And at any time you can flip it over. I will not take personally, I promise. It's completely up to you. And it just really helps me clarify and simplify things as I'm moving around the room and helping students with postures. That's about what I'd say.
That's great. I love how you give people the option to switch the cards and how you say it's not personal at all. And I really appreciate how you use the word assist. And on the photo of your cards, it says assist. And often in yoga teacher trainings, or even in my own language, which I've been very careful to try and avoid, but sometimes it just happens, is that I say instead adjustments.
Sure.
So I appreciate that you use the word assist. Do you have any other thoughts on that?
Let's see. Yeah, I mean, it is a conscious choice to use the word assist. And that was something that I learned from one of my teachers. So my background was in Anusara yoga before it has now become the post-Anusara diaspora. And one of my most influential teachers, Sarah Rose Page, she's here in Northampton, just clarified that point for me. I hadn't thought, oh, right, if I'm adjusting, it kind of implies that there's something that needs to change, or that it would be, better if something changed. Actually, for my level of expertise in assists, which I would say is not, I'm not a body worker, my assists really are assists, and they're not necessarily aimed at changing the posture, but sometimes, assisting the student in feeling something within the posture. And sometimes it's just, the good old low back in child's pose assist, and it just can feel really nice and grounding.
Great. Thanks for clarifying that. Do you always use hands-on assists?
That's a great question. No, I don't. I teach this class twice a week. It's a 7 to 8 a.m. class, and I inherited it from a previous teacher who taught from the front of the room, which is not my style from the training that I received. But I came into that, wanting to keep the class as he had been teaching it. And now I actually love that class because it's early morning. I feel like folks can just come in and be in their own zone. It's also gotten to be quite a big class, so it's nice that it's off the table for that class. And I actually say that to students explicitly in the beginning, especially if there's new students. It's quite a core group, but especially for when there's new students, I'll say, just so you know, in this class, I stay on my mat. And so it gives you a chance to have, if you're a visual learner, then this is a way that you can, see things really clearly. I'm doing most of the postures as you are, and I won't do any hands-on assist. So they just know in that class. And then I would say, just to be clear, in my trauma-sensitive classes that are specifically trauma-sensitive, I don't do any hands-on assists as well.
Okay. And then what classes do you often use hands-on assists?
Yeah, well, definitely for my teacher trainees. I see them once a month for 10 months. We're together so often in terms of those really intensive periods of time that we're quite a close group. And so they're usually like, yes, please, hands-on assist. But occasionally, someone will have menstrual cramps, or someone will be kind of just taking care of an injury or something. And it just gives them a really simple opt-out that doesn't have to be explained verbally. So definitely with teacher trainees. And then also in all of my other public classes, including at colleges that I mentioned. And that's been super successful. Just like I said, once the culture is built, it's like, okay, yeah, you pick up your consent card at the beginning of every class and you display it near the front of your mat. And once students really get that, then it's just simple.
Do you ever have the consent cards out and then not have time or not give any hands-on assists?
Oh, totally.
That makes me feel better.
What's been happening is, actually since that day on Instagram, it was the International Day of Yoga, Yoga International and Yoga Body Image Coalition, and one other group was doing the Make Yoga Accessible challenge. That's when I posted, and you saw that post. So since then, I was like, okay, every class, every time, I've got to do it. And it was a wonderful, actually, kick in the butt to really make sure I did it. But sometimes I'll forget. And usually now the cards are on my person. So I have extra in my purse and I have extra in my yoga bag. So I'll just pass them out like when the students are in their first couple of postures. So that's an easy way. And because they've heard me say it now at least a few times, they're like, oh yeah, I know what these cards are. Or I'll explain it to the, 1 or 2 or 3 new folks. The other thing I've been saying, particularly in my college classes, because I often have 30 students in those classes, I say, I won't take it personally, and also if you could do your best not to take it personally if I don't happen to get to you and you say that you do want hands-on assist, because, I'm moving around the room and giving instructions and it might just not be an appropriate flow or, whatever it might be. It's definitely not personal. So I do mention that particularly in those large classes. That's a great question.
Yeah, that's a good add-on for larger classes, or for some reason you just feel like today is not the day to assist. Oh, that's
totally.
good.
Yeah. And I would say, I mentioned like sometimes a student has menstrual cramps. Sometimes I have menstrual cramps and my energy is like pretty inward, and I'm using all of my muster just to get out there and teach a good sequence and hopefully inspire them. And then I kind of rely on the yoga to do the work. And, my background hopefully is going to carry me rather than my energy that day. And in that case, sometimes I just say, I'm not going to do hands-on assist today. And I don't make a big deal of it or make it about me, but that's part of our, as teachers, our consent. We should get to choose as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Such a good point. When your energy is low, that's not the day you want to be giving. I think that people can also sense that.
Oh, sure. Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm. What would you say is your favorite assist to receive?
Ooh, that is a great question. Let me think on that for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
I really like receiving assists in forward folds. I'm thinking of Uttanasana, standing. There's been an assist that's been going through our community of just hugging the hips in. So someone, firmly taking hands around the outer hips and hugging toward the midline. And then pressing down, rooting down, in this case from your hips through your legs to your feet. And then I really like an assist in Paschimottanasana as well. So seated forward fold, just because it's such a, if I'm in there deep, if I've prepared myself well, my hamstrings are feeling good, then it can be such a cozy pose. So to have someone kind of help me nestle in there a little bit deeper can be really nice.
Nice. What do you think is the most common pose that you assist?
Probably the child's pose, the kind of low back grounding down and back with in the sacrum area in child's pose. And part of that may be that lately I've been teaching more flow. I'm not assisting each and every posture because folks are moving too quickly. But I also do a lot of like in standing open hip postures. So like warrior two, for instance, I do a lot of gently widening the hips from the front inner knee and the back front of the iliac crest. And I just feel like that's a really common misalignment, the knee heading toward the big toe side of the foot rather than the pinky toe side. So that one can feel really nice too, rooting, grounding.
Yeah. Nice. And so you're making these consent cards. I was thrilled when you wrote back and said, yeah, I'm going to start making them and producing them.
Yes.
Tell us some more about that.
Sure. So I have this great graphic designer friend of mine, Seth Gregory. And so he made the original ones for me. And right now they're laminated. And my very sweet intern from Hampshire College cut each of them out, all 60 of them that I first got printed. And so my first question to Seth was, how can we make this easier? And how can we make these more durable, like to be mass produced? And so we're working on it. We were looking, because it does seem like as I've looked around, there are a few other people doing sort of yoga assist cards or chips or, things that you put on your mat and say yes or no. They seemed pretty expensive. So that was my first goal. I was like, I want to get these in the hands of as many people as possible and really popularize this. So we've been looking to see what we can do in terms of making it really durable, making the material very durable for these cards, and then also making them affordable. So we are very close to doing our first order, and I'll definitely keep you posted. It should be before the end of the summer. So.
Oh, that would be great.
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of yoga teachers make their own, and that can be quite time consuming. And then I've heard so many different variations on what the wording should be. So when I saw yours, I thought, yeah, those just look simple And it's very clear, yes, please, or no, thank you. And I appreciate the word assist is on there instead of adjustment.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's encouraging to hear that there are lots of teachers doing it themselves. And then it makes so much sense to me that that can be unsustainable. There's so much that we do as yoga teachers that is more than just teaching. So to have a simpler way to convey that really important message that, yes, you get to choose. I'm really excited to get this out there.
That's good. One other question then that I have for today, and it is not about the consent cards, is how are you right now finding time for your own yoga practice as a student?
Yeah. Oh, that's such a great question. I feel like that has been a journey that I've been on, particularly for the past 2 years, because about 2 years ago, I realized I was not practicing. I was doing maintenance practice. That was the only thing, which was like just the bare bones and really didn't provide me with the same depth that I wanted in my practice. And I was finding my body ailing from that. I was also at that time teaching 18 classes a week, which for me was entirely too many.
Wow.
So since then, I would say one very important thing has been the 500-hour training that I'm currently in that I've mentioned. And that has refueled my desire to practice and has also really clarified to me in a more embodied sense the importance of one's personal practice in being an effective and inspiring teacher. So I've seen my teaching change dramatically for the better as a result of me practicing on a more regular basis. And one thing is I've gotten really good at keeping my sequences. So I write out my sequences almost every single class. Sometimes I teach, a similar sequence a couple times a week. But I write them out, and for my teacher trainees, I actually type them out. And so then I have like a written record of what I've taught. And it's so useful for going back and I want to explore something in depth. I've got tons of peak pose practices. So I would say in the past couple of years, my commitment to practice has been much stronger, and I've become a much more effective teacher because of it. And I might also say I've become like a happier person.
Right.
I had just gotten to a point where I was like teaching all the time, and to be honest, was like a little bit sick of yoga.
Yes.
I was like, I don't want to go to a public class. I've been in a studio all day, so I do prioritize it now. That was my long answer to your question, but
that was a good answer. Well worth the length of it. Wow. That was inspiring. As a teacher, it can be easy to hit that, just kind of burnt out or giving. So I really appreciate you saying that being in a training is inspiring to you.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And I think I think that I will try my best to find some way of having something tangible. It's so easy to change our schedules sometimes as yoga teachers. Like we teach our classes, but I'll speak for myself. For me, I have these weird time frames of, in quotes, free space or free time. It's not actually free time. I can fill it with all sorts of, logistical or admin type stuff. And I'm just actually looking at I have a weekly calendar on my desk here, and I actually have scheduled in my practice times. And sometimes they're not, first thing in the morning. Sometimes, I have to fit it in at another moment. But yeah. So scheduling it in, and then also being in a training, having some sort of accountability. I think that's key.
Those are good. Very good. Inspiring to me, I'm sure. Inspiring to others as well. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. Do you want to let us know how we can find out more about you?
Sure. Yeah. Well, in terms of another thing yoga teachers do, I am currently remodeling my website. It will be the same name. So my name's very easy. My last name is Kitchen, just like the room. So it's just mollykitchen.com. And then the yoga school is Adhikara, Adhikara. So that's adhikarayogaschool.com. Yeah, I'd love to be in touch with folks. And Shannon, thank you so much for having me on.
You're welcome. I'll put links also to your 2 websites, with the yoga school and with your mollykitchen.com website.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
So there you have it, connected yoga teachers. So much information. Thank you, Molly, for your time. Thank you for this invention. I know I thank you because my consent cards that I used to use were butterflies, and then I had some that looked like kindergarten art. So it makes it look very professional now in my yoga classes when I use your consent cards. I really appreciated it in today's episode where Molly talked about her trauma-sensitive yoga teacher training and that we've likely all experienced some type of trauma. This really goes along the same lines of the message that we heard from Margaret Howard in episode 3. I'll put a link to that in our show notes. And Margaret talked to us about how she really believed that trauma training should be part of every 200-hour basic yoga teacher training. She gave us a lot of information in that episode. Again, I will link to it in our show notes. I also really appreciated how Molly shared with us that students really appreciate hands-on assists. This was one of the things that she received in her feedback forms, and this is some of the feedback I receive from my students a lot. So I think that in the balance of looking at everyone has trauma and we are not touching people in a trauma-sensitive yoga class, we then can tip a little too far and be thinking, okay, I'm not going to be touching anyone. So the consent cards really give us that permission in the moment and consent for students to change their mind in the moment. As Molly said, it gives us this clarity. And she also highlighted that most students keep the cards to yes, please assist me. I also have to mention again that I really appreciate this assist versus adjust wording. And I talked about this in a previous episode. It was episode 4, and I talked about 5 ways to assist without touch. So if you're feeling like, you know what, I want to assist my students, but I don't want to be touching them, that's a great episode to go back to because we can still be assisting them. And then I really want to highlight again, the reason why I use that wording is because I don't want my students to feel like I'm fixing them or correcting them in some way. I want them to feel like I'm helping them. I'm enhancing the yoga pose. I'm assisting. So that's just my take on that. And I was really excited to hear Molly use the same wording, assist. If you're using the word adjust, simply look at it. Does it serve you? No shame, no blame here at all if you use that. Sometimes I even slip up and have said adjustment because it's very prevalent in the yoga world. So I will put all of the links to Molly's personal yoga teaching page if you would like to take a class with her, her yoga teacher training page if you think that you would like to study with her, and also the consent cards page if you would like to order some consent cards for your own class. When I decide in one of my classes that hands-on assist is what I would like to offer, consent cards are my ultimate tool of knowing and empowering students to give that consent. Sometimes though, I have decided I'm at a yoga class, maybe it's not a regular yoga class that I always teach, maybe I'm subbing or just a guest teacher, and I haven't brought my consent cards with me. So in that moment, there's a few other things that you could think about doing. You can ask permission for each assist. Now, I don't suggest doing this in every class and going around because it'd be very disruptive. You're using a lot of words, you're putting someone on the spot right away. But if you don't have your consent cards with you, maybe you didn't even intend on assisting. Sometimes there are moments when, as a teacher, you just think, if I could just use a hands-on assist, this would really help the student. That's the time where I would walk over and say quietly, not to put them on the spot in front of everyone, is it okay if I touch you? May I offer this assist? Another thing that we can think about is asking students as a group anonymously. I've been in yoga classes where, say, everyone moves into child's pose or downward dog, and then there's a question, if you would not like to receive hands-on assist today, please raise a hand so that I know that I will leave you alone in your own practice today. I feel like this gets used a little bit more in teacher trainings where everyone is usually on board for assists and then everyone is also okay with, you know what, today I just don't want to be touched. Another way to do this is using your intuition, and I have done this. It's not something that I would say is my first. As I said earlier, consent cards are really the first thing that I turn to. So it is really my last option, but it comes in handy. You can get a feel for, okay, does this person want to be assisted? And I mean, even assisted, do I go and pick up the blocks for them and bring them? Do I go stand closer to them? You kind of get a feel for if students want you in their space or not. That comes with time and practice. There is one other way that we often don't think about to get consent from students, and that is to advertise a class with hands-on assists. So students are signing up and they know it's a full class of hands-on assists. This is one of the most popular classes at our tone studio here in Owen Sound. Maxine and Kathy teach that usually on a monthly basis. They limit the number of people who are coming. There's 2 of them. This type of class is one that I'm really passionate about teaching yoga teachers how to facilitate in the Art of Assist training that I do. So that one is in Owen Sound now. It's in person. That's one that's really difficult to bring online. You really need to be in person to learn hands-on assist at this point anyway. So that's kind of a wrap up of other ways. I have seen one other way or heard of one other way of a yoga class that had a line down the middle. Anyone who would like to be assisted was on one side of the line. Anyone who didn't was on the other side of the line. And as far as I knew, the line was getting closer and closer to the edge to make room for more students that wanted hands-on assist. So wherever you are in this spectrum of wanting to give hands-on assist or not doing touch at all, we would love to hear your feedback. So you can leave a comment in the show notes. Just go to theconnectedyogateacher.com, click on podcasts, and then you can see every episode there and leave a comment in the show notes. Thank you to Sherry Longbottom, who left a review. She said, just gave a 5-star review, sweet friend. Your podcasts are amazing. Thanks, Sherry. Your feedback on the live show is wonderful, and I'm so thankful for your review. Thank you also to Yaya. Am I saying that right? I hope I am. She says, he says, Abhyaya says, I find these podcasts full of practical information. So helpful. What a great initiative and idea. Thank you for sharing this with us, Shannon. A great resource for yoga teachers. I love it, you guys. Thanks for the reviews. Keep them coming. It really does help us to know how we're doing, and it helps us to show up in iTunes so we can help other yoga teachers. All right, connected yoga teachers, have an amazing week. I will see you guys next week.